So suppose you have two candidates, one who possesses this virtue in an ideal situation, let's say 50%, one who has this virtue and the other who does not. Do you see that the one who has it is actually constrained by their own virtue?
Yes.
He cannot lie, he cannot manipulate, he cannot promise things he does not intend to do, whereas the other, who lacks virtue, can slander the first, can make things up, can promise things that are absolutely impossible to fulfill, offer things that flatter the personal interests of their voters, in such a way that, if at first both were there and I had no information, I could choose one or the other by chance, it would be a 50% chance for each. But from the moment that one can do anything and the other can do nothing, this proportion becomes very, very unfair. Who would relate to the man who says, look, if I take office, your social class may have to make a greater sacrifice to face a slightly higher tax in order to balance the whole? Who would choose a man like that? Instead of the other who says, you won't pay anything, you will be privileged? So, in practice, the situation sometimes becomes quite unfair, doesn't it? The way we carry things out is a rather uncertain equation.
Well, and Plato, returning to his work in the political organization of society, he went so far as to comment that philosophers should be rulers or that rulers should be philosophers. Do you think that with this he was trying to solve the problem of the worst people being in power? Did he want to put someone good in that position because he believed that, in this way, society could function better?
Yes, I think so. Of course, we cannot know for certain, but I envision a syllogism in Plato's mind because, in fact, when you create society starting from the reasoning of the Republic, you establish a society where each person does everything necessary for their own survival. After some time doing this, people begin to realize that some have a greater natural inclination, for example, to build houses. One person builds houses wonderfully well, but when it comes to making his own clothes, he does it very poorly. Another has a natural talent for tanning leather and making clothes exceptionally well, but he is a terrible house builder, and so on with others. At a certain point, people would come to an agreement that the one who builds houses could focus solely on building houses for everyone, and thus all would have the best houses. The one who makes clothes, who weaves garments, would have the responsibility, let's put it that way, of making clothes for everyone, and thus all would have the finest clothing. So each person would dedicate themselves to a single craft, the one that aligns with their own nature. Therefore, probably within society, for every human need, nature would provide a human being who finds fulfillment in performing that task, right? But then, at a certain point, they realize that beyond clothing and shelter, human beings also need justice. And so, it would be necessary to seek out which human nature is inclined to bring about justice, to carry out justice. Then he begins to imagine. Imagine a person who holds power. This person in power has access to many things, as we have discussed. They can easily commit all kinds of injustices. So what could we do to prevent this from happening? Of course, these are my own words. I'm not saying this is exactly in the Republic, but this is how I imagine it. You would have to appoint a guardian to watch over this ruler, but who can guarantee that this guardian wouldn't ally with him and also become corrupt?
Who watches the watcher, right?
Exactly. You appoint a watcher to watch the watcher, and soon you have a watcher watching the watcher of the watcher of the watcher. It turns into a domino effect. When one falls, they all fall. So this doesn't solve the problem. A good idea would be to place this guardian within the human being as their own conscience, so that their conscience would watch over them and not allow them to fall into injustice, to lapse in ethics, or to succumb to corruption. Who is this person who loves truth, who loves wisdom and seeks truth, and seeks wisdom by their very nature, by their own inclination, and not because someone is watching them from the outside? That would be the philosopher, because a philosopher is exactly that. One who loves wisdom. Philos or philia plus Sophia, one who loves wisdom. So this person will seek wisdom, will seek truth, will seek the idea of the good, because that is their inner inclination, not because someone is watching them from the outside. That is why this would be the ideal person to lead this government. You do not need to watch over them. Within themselves, they have someone who ensures loyalty to these principles. That is why he said that this would be the safest person to lead a society. Ideally, this person would first demonstrate this inclination and only then become a ruler. Because perhaps the ruler who is currently in power does not possess this nature. How can you bring this quality to life? There is a passage I am very fond of, often cited from the anecdotes about the life of Socrates, especially in Xenophon, where at a certain moment people are said to have asked Socrates, "Socrates, you are so virtuous, you speak so well, you are so persuasive, such a great philosopher, why don't we go there, take the 30 tyrants of Athens, and have you speak to them all until they are all converted into philosophers?" And Socrates is said to have replied, "Look, my mother, Phaenarete, was a midwife and an excellent one, but there is one thing she would never have been able to do, which was to deliver a woman who is not pregnant. Do you understand?" In other words, if you are not already pregnant with philosophy, with the love of wisdom, I am not the one who will be able to deliver your child. No matter how excellent a midwife I may be, because Socrates said that was exactly what he was, right? A midwife of souls. No matter how skilled a midwife you are, if that person is not pregnant with philosophy, that is, not eager for the pursuit of wisdom, there is nothing that can be done, right? I remember that this was one of the most telling experiences I had. I was still very young at the time. It was a simple thing, but it left a deep impression on me. On one occasion, I dreamed that I was pregnant and the child wanted to be born, but I didn't want to let it happen. That was such a terrible feeling. I hugged my belly and absolutely refused to let that child be born. And I was left with that feeling. Later, I kept thinking, what is it inside me that wants to be born? And I am causing so much pain because I won't allow this to be born. I was very young, and I have never forgotten that feeling. I began to reflect, every time I experienced intense pain in life, what was it that wanted to be born but wasn't? And what was I not allowing to come into being? And to this day, I hold on to this impression that often, in a society like ours, which is marked by numerous cases of depression, anxiety, and similar issues, especially among young people and increasingly so, I wonder if these are not the pains of a birth that we do not allow to happen, you know? Something wants to be born, and we do not let it.
Perhaps it is something created by the mind, right?
All the social palliatives we create for this do not resolve it. They are simply escape routes, and the pain only grows stronger and stronger. If this is not something within us that longs to be born, and we do not give it space, or we do not see this possibility outlined in our current culture,